When Margaret Phillips first turned 65, she thought her biggest adjustment would be retiring from her teaching career. For decades, her mornings had been regimented: up by 6, coffee brewing before the sun even rose, and a commute filled with the soft hum of public radio. But after retirement, her schedule became, well, a little too flexible. Without the structure of work, her body seemed to take liberties with her sleep. At first, she welcomed the idea of staying up late reading novels or watching classic films, but soon she began waking up at strange hours, often between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. At first, she brushed it off as one of those quirks of aging. Friends in her book club joked about the 3 a.m. club, swapping stories about how they wandered their kitchens in the dark, sipping chamomile tea or scrolling through their phones. But after weeks of broken sleep, Margaret started feeling the effects: low energy, foggy thinking, and a restless mood she couldn't shake. It wasn't just inconvenient, it was unsettling. She missed the solid rest she once took for granted. One chilly November night, Margaret awoke at exactly 3:17 a.m. Her small bungalow was quiet except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. She lay there staring at the ceiling, willing herself to drift back to sleep, but her mind was too alert. She thought about her late husband, Daniel, about the repairs she needed to make on the house, about whether she'd remembered to pay the water bill. The more she tried to relax, the more awake she became. Instead of tossing and turning, she decided to try something different. She padded into the kitchen, wrapped in her robe, and poured herself a glass of warm water. She remembered something she'd read in a health magazine, that early morning wakefulness could be the body's way of signaling a need for certain habits rather than a sign something was wrong. She decided to treat this wake-up window not as a curse, but as an opportunity. That night began the first of many small changes that would, over time, transform her mornings and her overall well-being. Margaret's first shift was to use those quiet hours for deep breathing exercises. At 3:20 that morning, she sat in her armchair by the window, closed her eyes, and inhaled slowly, counting to 4. She held the breath for another count of 4, then exhaled just as slowly. At first, she felt silly. She'd always been a woman who liked doing things, not just sitting in stillness. But after a few minutes, she noticed a calm settle over her. The tension in her shoulders loosened. The racing thoughts slowed. She didn't necessarily fall back asleep immediately, but she felt more centered. On another night, she decided to keep a journal by her bedside. The early hours, she found, were when her mind was clearest and most reflective. She wrote about her memories with Daniel, her hopes for her grandchildren, and even little gratitude lists: the sound of rain on the roof, the scent of fresh bread from the bakery down the street, the smile from her neighbor's little boy. What began as a way to pass the time soon became a cherished ritual. These journal entries, scribbled in the half-light before dawn, helped her feel grounded and more emotionally balanced during the day. Margaret also discovered the power of gentle movement during this time. She began keeping a yoga mat rolled up in the corner of her bedroom. Nothing strenuous, just slow stretches, rolling her shoulders, touching her toes, turning her neck from side to side. The physical release not only eased the stiffness in her joints, but seemed to tell her body, "It's okay, you're cared for." Her flexibility improved over weeks, and the quiet exercise gave her a peaceful start that lingered well into the afternoon. Another shift was her habit of drinking herbal tea instead of coffee when she woke early. Coffee, she realized, could lock her into wakefulness, making it harder to fall back asleep if she wanted to. She tried peppermint, lemon balm, and her favorite, lavender chamomile. The warm mug in her hands, the fragrant steam rising to her face, became a small joy she looked forward to. This change also meant her mornings, whenever they officially began, felt less jittery and more relaxed. Perhaps the most transformative change came when Margaret used those hours for mindful planning, not anxious list-making, but a gentle envisioning of her day. She would sit quietly, imagining herself moving through her errands with ease, laughing with friends over lunch, or taking a walk in the park with her daughter. Instead of waking at 3 a.m. feeling like something was wrong, she began to wake feeling like she'd been given a gift, uninterrupted time to set the tone for her day. Months passed, and her friends noticed a change in her. She seemed brighter, more energized, even on days when she admitted she'd been up before dawn. Margaret had learned that her body wasn't failing her. It was simply nudging her toward a new rhythm. What once felt like an inconvenience had become a doorway to a richer, calmer, more intentional life. She often shared her story with other women in her church group, encouraging them not to dread those early wake-up calls. Between 3 and 5 in the morning, she would say, is when the world is at its quietest. If you can't sleep, don't fight it. Use it. She'd tell them about her breathing exercises, her journal, her stretches, her tea, and her gentle planning. Some laughed, saying they'd never be able to do yoga in the middle of the night. Others tried it and later told her they felt more at peace. Margaret's own nights still varied. Sometimes she slept through, other times she was up before the sun, but she no longer feared those hours. They had become her secret pocket of time, a space to breathe, reflect, and align herself before the demands of the day. One spring morning, long before dawn, she sat by her kitchen window watching the first light seep into the sky. She thought about the young woman she'd been, rushing through life, always working, always moving, always too busy to notice the quiet beauty of early mornings. Now, in her older years, she had finally learned to appreciate them. The clock struck 5, and she smiled, ready to greet the day, not tired, not anxious, but calm, grounded, and quietly joyful.